As the often violent protests across the US continue, what effects are they having on the way people view the Democratic leaders who control most of these cities? Here to talk about that is Seattle radio show host Jason Rantz. Jason, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How are things there in the Democratic People's Republic of Seattle, or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the way it's been for the last several months. Earlier this week, we had a pretty horrific attack on police officers. Monday night, we had a mob descending upon the East Precinct police station. This was the one that was most famous nationally because it was in the CHOP zone, which is what was overtaken by the activists. They tried to seal the door shut with cement while simultaneously trying to burn it down. And the council and the mayor's office said absolutely nothing. So it's pretty much status quo, where we have total chaos and no one is actually leading.
I think sealing police officers into a building and then trying to burn it down falls definitely into the category of peaceful protest, don't you?
Yeah, oh, totally. It was a redecorating of the East Precinct. It was cold that night. It was a bonfire.
What do you think effects this could be having on the way in which people view Democrats? All of these cities, Seattle, Portland, Kenosha, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, these cities are all, New York City, Chicago, all controlled by Democrats, have been for a very long time. And in many ways, those leaders seem to kind of actually, certainly haven't been very critical of the protesters. What effect is it having on the way people view the Democratic Party?
I think the effect is pretty clear because now all of a sudden Joe Biden and some Democrats are starting to talk about it. I mean, for the longest time, you had some outlets pretending none of this was happening. And if they would mention it, it would be just sort of being blamed on Donald Trump. But people are looking at the images on Twitter, on Facebook. They're getting access to it. And they live in these neighborhoods. They live in these communities. And they're saying to themselves, look, you can blame Trump all you want, but our mayor is here. Our council is here. They're doing absolutely nothing. And they're making the connections on their own. And there's only one party that's really been consistently talking about needing to get this under control and speaking in support of our police officers. And at some point, the need for security in our own neighborhoods is going to trump all the talking points coming from the left. And I do think regardless of whether or not you vote as a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican, it is going to start to hurt the Democratic Party in these cities. There's only so much that a lot of people can take, again, regardless of their political positions. As you say, and
the media has been, for the most part, suggesting that all this is overdone and, in fact, as you say, denying that it was even happening. But do you think people are now really changing the way they view this? I mean, there was some sympathy for the protesters, I think, early on. Do you think now, as we get into this and we see, especially as we see more and more of this violence, do you think people are changing their views about the way, about these protests and what's going on?
100%, because it's no longer about protests. It's now about riots and mobs. Everyone was on the same side. Everyone was united after the killing, the murder of George Floyd. I think from the left to the right to socialists to independents, everyone was rightfully outraged by the video that we saw. And then all of a sudden it turned to rioting and looting. And people can simultaneously be disgusted by what we saw in that video while also holding the position that not all cops are the horrible things that people are saying, that it's inappropriate to burn down buildings, to attack people on city streets, to allow mob rule. You could hold both views, and I think most Americans hold both views. But there's only one party right now that's taking that position. You've got the Democrats that have decided over the course of last week, and their platform is pretty much vilifying police officers. On the right, you've had lots of folks say we can subscribe to police reforms that make sense while also supporting police officers. And I think that's where most Americans are. Very quickly, Jason, because we've got to wrap.
You saw, I'm sure, President Trump's speech on Thursday night. Do you think that message resonates with voters, particularly on what kind of a country the Democrats might represent?
I do. I think it needs just to be hammered home. I think they did a really good job over the course of the week, and now you've got to do this all the way into November, because very clearly the activist base on the left are not going to be happy with that message, so we just need to be on top of it.
Jason, thank you very much indeed. Just ahead, it's not just the Democrats, but the media who bear responsibility for a lot of what's happening in American cities. And I'll explain what they're up to next.